Hi guys, it's Hannah and welcome back to another video. Now today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. I read a total of 12 books, 3 of which were comics, and I've got my bullet journal here with all of my ratings. So, these aren't in any particular order. I'm just going through the list that I read them in, and I'll give you my brief I'll give you my ratings and a brief review of each one. So first of all, we have A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabo. This is the first in the Mirror Visitor book, which is series, which is translated from French. And look at the floppy. This gave me major 5-star vibes. It is currently doing the rounds on the BookTube, but this is a polar fantasy with these arcs in the sky. We follow Ophelia, who has always lived on one arc called Anima, and her patron goddess is Artemis, and Artemis has granted Ophelia the ability to read the pasts of objects as well as to travel through mirrors. The reading the pasts of objects is quite common in her family, whereas her mirror travelling is a little bit more rare. She is quite happy with where she is in life. She runs the family museum. She's quite content and she doesn't seem to care what anybody thinks. But then her peaceful life is interrupted when the powers that be decide that she is to marry Thorn, who is the son of he's a member of a cold and distant arc called... I read this was the first thing I read, and for it being 5-star, I do remember a lot of it, but details aren't sticking, which is a shame. But I have the second book here, which I'm hoping to read, and I've just bought the third book as well, so I did absolutely adore this. Would highly recommend. There's a sentient scarf. Well, somewhat sentient, but yeah. And Thorn, it does take a while to warm up to him, because Ophelia herself takes a while to warm up to him. Pun intended there. Anyway, we have one of the DC Icon series. This is Superman Dawnbreaker by Matt De La Penna. I can never say that. I give this one 4 stars. It was lacking something, but that could just be personal preference because I am more of a Marvel fan than a DC fan. But I did enjoy the Smallville TV show. But basically, this follows Clark as he's coming into his powers. He's trying to control them. Then immigrants are going missing, and it is a very important story on how racism and small town life interact and all the tensions that are raised from that. So I guess it's not for me, but I think that's more because I'm more Marvel than DC. Give me a story about Iron Man or Captain Marvel or Captain America. They're all the time. DC, I like Catwoman. And I like Wonder Woman, so, but yeah, 4 stars for that one. And I do have the Wonder Woman book, the Catwoman book. I've read the Batman. I'm sure there's another one. No, that was it. Catwoman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. So I've read 2, and they're okay. Then we have Fable by Adrienne Young. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Adrienne Young. I gave this one 3 stars. It's not to say it's a bad book. It's just it's not for me, which is a shame because this book is gorgeous. It's nice little size for a hardback, but it follows Fable, who is the daughter of a notorious trader / pirate. He leaves her on an island and basically says, "Survive, I'll come back for you eventually." And it has so much promise, but for me it feels flat. bored. I know that's an awful thing to say, especially since Adrienne herself says that she wrote this as a way to say goodbye to her own father. So it is quite an emotional book for her, but I just didn't like it. I just couldn't bring myself to care. I just didn't like anything that was going on. But I am a completionist and I have to finish books, so it got a 3 because I did finish it. Then we have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This book, it's best if I don't tell you too much about this one, other than we follow Piranesi, who has always lived in the house. And he has these notebooks which tell him what's going on, but things are starting to change. We've gotten messages beginning to appear in this house, which is like a very strange, timeless TARDIS. And I read this in pretty much one sitting, and it's not a big book, but I don't think there was illustrations as such. But it's told in sort of journal entries, so the chapter sizes vary, and it's very fantastically literary and whimsical. A bit dark, but it got 5 stars, and I will be on the hunt for a copy of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because that book is massive, and I really enjoyed Susanna's writing style in this one, so hopefully I'll like her other book just as much. Then we have Moon Over Soho. This got 4 stars from me. This is a sequel to Rivers of London, which follows PC Peter Grant, who is a probationary is he probationary or is he just a police officer? Either way, he's a police officer investigating mundane crimes, as well as the paranormal, fantastical element of London that not a lot of people get to see. I gave it a 4 stars. There's nothing wrong with the plot, pacing, intrigue. All of that was brilliant, but it's one of those books that you can tell was written by a man. His female characters are just sort of defined by their bodies, but once you get past that, it is funny. It is interesting, and we are getting into we have the mini mysteries, I'm going to call it, which is the main focus of the murder investigation and the plot, but it is starting to perhaps develop into the overarching plot of the series, where we have our big bad guy and we learn more about him. And I did like the ending of this one a little bit better than the ending of the first one. Maybe it's because I just know the characters a little bit more, but it's a 4 star. We have some comics. Now, these I did read on Friday, all in one day, because it was quiet at work and I had nothing better to do. But so we have, I'll do them in order. We have Monstrous Volume 5, War Child. This got 4 stars. Basically, I can't tell you too much because they are all sequels, but Monstrous follows the story of Maker Half-Wolf, who is inhabited by this godlike demon that is eating her from the inside out, and she's trying to understand why her, as well as trying to stop the evil nuns from taking over against these half animal chimera type creatures. But look at the artwork, I want that framed. But this is volume 5. We are getting into the nitty gritty now. Things are starting to pick up. I want more, but I think there's only 5 volumes out so far, and this got 4 stars. I don't think I read enough variation of comics to give them 5 stars, even though I read them and love them and would reread them. I don't think whereas with the fantasy, I know what a 5 star is for me, and I use Corpile, which was created by G at Book Roast, to rate as well, so these don't tend to get 5 stars from me, just because I don't think I've read enough comics to give a balanced opinion. But then we have Volume 4, Rising Action, and Volume 5, Imperial Phase Part 1 of The Wicked and the Divine. And I'm so glad I read these together because they both got 4 stars, and the endings just made me want to read more. I do like this edition. I like this one slightly more than the previous one because we do get like a character interview with some of the remaining characters. But basically, with The Wicked and the Divine, if you didn't know, this is the story of 12 gods returning to the world every 90 years. They get to do what they want for 2 years, and then they die. And we are following the sequence. We've got quite a few deaths. There's trigger warnings for quite a bit in this one. I personally don't tend to get bothered by much, so if you are wanting trigger warnings or anything like that, I would suggest looking on Goodreads or other reviewers who do notice the triggers a lot more than what I personally do. So we have that. Then we have Sepulchre by Kate Moss. This is technically a sequel to Labyrinth, but it could be read on its own. It just has one character from Labyrinth that carries on in Sepulchre, but he's a minor side character, and it took me a while to figure out why this was classed as a sequel. But basically this is a split time narrative, which I'm learning that I really enjoy, especially when it's Miss Moss. But in this one, we follow Leonie Vernier in 1891. They start in Paris, but then they abandon through events, end up going to their aunt's isolated country house in Corsican. I can never say that. And obviously things happen from there. Leonie finds a sepulchre, which I think is a gate, but I'm not entirely sure, and some tarot cards, which are very important to our second protagonist in our second time stream, which is who is Meredith Martin, and she's in 2007. She's researching a book for Debussy, who has interactions in Leonie's timeline. But there is more to it than that, because obviously this is a 700 odd page book, but it reads so quick. You might not necessarily need to read Labyrinth first, but I would recommend reading Labyrinth and Sepulchre both, but the order doesn't really matter too much. It's just with Labyrinth you understand why a certain character reacts and acts the way he does and why he is the way he is. But he's not a main character, so you can do without that knowledge, but it is handy to have because it gives you a fuller picture of him, and would also, I'm guessing, lead into the third book, which is Citadel, which I do have behind me somewhere. But yeah, Kate Moss is becoming a bit of a auto-buy favourite author for historical fiction, and she got 5 stars for this book. We have The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, and this one got 4 stars. I couldn't rate it 5 because I struggled with the writing at some point, but I am glad I read it because now I don't feel so much like a fraud. I can turn around and say, I'm a fantasy reader, I've read The Hobbit, I've read The Lord of the Rings. If anybody else has any more classic or, well, the favourite fantasies that they want me to try, let me know. But this is obviously the third and final volume of The Lord of the Rings. Sam, I feel sorry for Sam. But what's interesting is that obviously, if you know, this book is actually 2 volumes bound into one, and in the first book, well, the first book of this volume, there's no Sam, there's no Frodo. It focuses on the other guys, which I did appreciate, because obviously with them we see more of what's going on in the wider world, because obviously Sam and Frodo are stuck up a mountain getting attacked by giant spiders, and I don't think that's a spoiler because I think at this point everybody has either read Lord of the Rings or at least seen the movies. And while some of the while some of the aspects of the book were cut in the movies, I do think the big plot points were kept, except what they're called, because I keep calling them minor 49ers, but they're not. The dead guys with Aragorn. Don't think they happen in this book, or if they did, I missed it. But yeah, so there's some changes, but I might do a full review comparison in future. Just have to find the time to watch the movies. Not that that's a bad thing. But yep, we have that one. We are nearly at the end. Then we have probably my favourite book of the month, which was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This got 5 stars. I absolutely adore this world. I am currently reading the sequel, which is The Kingdom of Copper. I haven't started it yet, but this follows Nari, who is a bit of a con woman. She has some healing ability in the streets of Cairo, 18th century Cairo. She gets a little bit carried away conning people and getting them to spend money in a friend's apothecary where they may not necessarily need to. But she accidentally summons a djinn, D-J-I-N-N, because otherwise I think of alcoholic gin whenever I hear that. That would be a totally different book. She summons a djinn, Dara. It's Dara. Just double check and see if I can find him now. But yeah, we have Dara who ends up transporting Nari to his world, and they discover that Nari is more than she appears to be. Her healing powers are very important, and she has a big part to play in this world. I think she could either destroy it or make it restore it to its former glory. And then the other protagonist that we have in here is Ali, and he is a prince. I think he's the second son. And he's trying to, through him we see obviously the politics and how the world works, but we also see the downside, the not so shiny parts of the world that perhaps the king doesn't want people to see, because it's very political, very atmospheric, and the writing is just gorgeous. I was heartbroken at the end of this book. I'm not going to lie, up until like the last 150 pages, this was just going to be a really good, solid 4-star, but the ending just ripped my heart out, and I need to know what happens next. So that's, if a book can get a reaction from me like that, whether I'm angry for a character, heartbroken for a character, sad for a character, extremely happy for a character, or I just enjoy the world so much that I don't care about the characters so much, which is rare, it gets a 5-star. So if you can make me care and want to rip out the character's heart because they did that to me. So yeah, I think this is probably going to be on the top books of the year, but it's a little bit early to start thinking about that, but I thoroughly recommend that one. And then we have A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. This book is chock full of LGBTQ representation, and it doesn't feel like the characters have just been put in there to meet that quota, just to say, just to tick the representation box. They have their own personalities and their own story arcs that don't always yes, well, their sexuality plays a part because everybody has things that they're struggling with or whatnot, but they aren't defined by their sexuality. Their sexuality is part of them, it isn't them. But this got 4 stars. There were things about it that were a little bit confusing, and I didn't particularly understand everything that was going on. But basically, in this one, we have it's billed as The Cruel Prince meets City of Bones, and yes, I can see you have fairies in the real world, real world, trying to discover who is killing off the half fae, half mortal people, and we follow 4 queer teens who obviously band together and save the day. But I absolutely adore the world's building, because obviously we flash between modern day mortal Toronto and the fairy side of that, and how the fae interacted with technology was really interesting as well, because obviously throughout most fantastical stories, at least the ones that I've read, the magic and technology don't tend to get along, but in this one it works, and it works beautifully. I believe that it is a duology, and I will keep an eye out for the sequel, because I do want to know what happens next, because obviously it ends on not quite a cliffhanger, but it's not quite an open-ended. I mean, the main mystery is solved, we know who the bad guy is, but there are certain elements in it where the bad guy wasn't the bad guy. But that's the end of the books, so let's pick them all up. So in total I read 3 graphic novels, 9 books, 2 or 3 I would say are adults. No, 4. 4 adult, 5 adult, the rest middle, the rest young adult. Majority are of course fantasy, with one classic. I'm going to call the Lord of the Rings classics in it, and just don't fight me on this one. But yep, the page count is, I don't know, but this has been one of my better reading months, and I think I should make more time to read my comics. Maybe not speed through them as much as I have been, just so I can understand the art and take it in. But that's me rambling on for long enough. Let me know what you've been reading in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!